in the serene halls of Meadowbank School, where elite girls study under watchful eyes, a single gunshot shatters the calm. A gym mistress lies dead, an emerald glints in the shadows, and a tennis racket hides a fortune in smuggled jewels. Hercule Poirot steps into a web of espionage, royal secrets, and betrayal, where every teacher hides a motive and every clue points to danger. As fires burn and codes unravel, can Poirot catch the cunning killer, the cat among the pigeons, before the school falls to chaos? Chapter 1. A quiet beginning. At Meadowbank, sun cast a golden glow over the manicured lawns of Meadowbank School, its ivy-clad walls standing as a testament to tradition and excellence. Nestled in the heart of the English countryside, the institution was a haven for the daughters of diplomats, aristocrats, and the quietly wealthy. It was the first day of the summer term, and the air buzzed with the chatter of girls reuniting after the holidays, their voices mingling with the rustle of starched uniforms and the clatter of trunks being hauled to dormitories. Miss Eleanor Bulstrode, the headmistress, stood at the tall windows of her study, her keen eyes surveying the scene below. A woman of formidable presence, with iron-gray hair and a posture that brooked no nonsense, she prided herself on Meadowbank's reputation as a beacon of discipline and intellect. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, she felt a faint unease. The new term brought new faces, pupils and staff alike, and with them, the subtle unpredictability that always accompanied change. Among the new arrivals was Miss Springer, the gym mistress, a broad-shouldered woman with a brusque manner and a penchant for barking orders. Her appointment had been a practical one. Meadowbank needed a firm hand to manage the energetic girls, and Miss Springer's credentials were impeccable. Yet, her sharp tongue had already caused ripples, as Miss Bulstrode noted during the staff meeting that morning. "Discipline is essential," Miss Springer had declared, her voice cutting through the room. "But these girls need tougher metal. Too much coddling." Miss Van Sittard, the deputy headmistress, had raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, while Miss Chadwick, the school secretary, scribbled notes with her usual quiet efficiency. Miss Chadwick was a study in contrasts to Miss Springer. Slender, with mousy hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, she moved through Meadowbank like a shadow, her presence barely noticed, yet indispensable. Her desk in the administrative office was a model of order, every file meticulously labeled, every appointment recorded with precision. Miss Bulstrode relied on her implicitly. Yet there was something about Miss Chadwick's reserved demeanor, a flicker of guardedness in her pale eyes that lingered in the headmistress's mind, far from Meadowbank's ordered world. In a small London flat, Hercule Poirot sat in an armchair, a cup of hot chocolate steaming in his hand. The retired detective, with his immaculate mustache and polished patent leather shoes, was savoring a rare moment of tranquility. His days of chasing criminals seemed behind him, replaced by the gentle rhythm of reading newspapers and tending to his beloved symmetry. Yet, as he sipped his chocolate, a letter on the side table caught his eye. It bore the crest of Inspector Kelsey, an old friend from Scotland Yard, and its contents hinted at a matter requiring Poirot's unique talents. "A trifling affair, perhaps," the letter read, "but one that may benefit from your little gray cells." Poirot's lips twitched into a smile. Retirement, it seemed, was never quite permanent. Back at Meadowbank, the girls settled into their routines. Jennifer Sutcliffe, a tall, athletic girl with a penchant for tennis, was unpacking her trunk when her friend Julia Upjohn burst into the dormitory, her freckled face alight with gossip. "Have you seen the new gym mistress?" Julia whispered, her eyes wide. "She's like a drill sergeant. I heard she made Mary cry during trials this morning." Jennifer shrugged, more interested in her new tennis racket, a gift from her uncle, a diplomat who traveled exotic lands. "It feels odd," she muttered, swinging it experimentally. "Heavy, somehow." Julia laughed, dismissing it as Jennifer's imagination. But the comment hung in the air, unnoticed yet significant. As evening fell, Miss Bulstrode walked the school's corridors, her footsteps echoing on the polished floors. The girls were at supper, their laughter filtering through the dining hall doors. She paused by a portrait of Meadowbank's founder, a stern woman whose gaze seemed to pierce through time. A new term, Miss Bulstrode murmured, and new challenges. She could not have known that, within days, those challenges would shatter the school's calm, drawing Hercule Poirot into a web of murder, jewels, and secrets hidden in the most unlikely of places. Chapter 2. The first cracks the morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Meadowbank School, casting long dappled shadows across the polished oak floors of the gymnasium. The air was thick with the scent of linseed oil and the faint tang of rubber from the mats stacked neatly against the walls. It was a place of disciplined energy, where the girls of Meadowbank honed their agility under the stern gaze of Miss Springer, the new gym mistress. Her voice, sharp and commanding, echoed through the cavernous space as she directed a group of fourth-formers through a series of vaulting exercises. "Higher, Patricia. Knees up, girl," she barked, her broad shoulders squared as she clapped her hands for emphasis. The girls, flushed with exertion, obeyed with varying degrees of enthusiasm, their murmurs of discontent barely audible over the thud of feet on the sprung floor. Miss Eleanor Bulstrode, the headmistress, stood at the gymnasium's entrance, observing the scene with her customary blend of approval and scrutiny. She admired Miss Springer's efficiency, though she could not help but note the tension her brusque manner elicited. The girls, accustomed to the gentler encouragement of their previous gym mistress, seemed wary, their glances darting toward Miss Springer as if she were a storm cloud threatening to burst. Miss Bulstrode made a mental note to speak with her. Later, Meadowbank's reputation rested on harmony as much as discipline. Turning away, she caught sight of Miss Chadwick, the school's secretary, hurrying past with a sheaf of papers clutched to her chest. The woman's pale face was set in its usual expression of quiet diligence, but there was a tightness about her mouth that Miss Bulstrode found curious. "Good morning, Miss Chadwick," she called, her tone warm but probing. Miss Chadwick started slightly, her fingers tightening on the papers. "Good morning, Miss Bulstrode," she replied, her voice soft but precise. "Just delivering the term schedules to the staff room." She offered a fleeting smile before hastening on, her low heels clicking against the corridor floor. Miss Bulstrode watched her go, her keen mind registering the secretary's haste as something more than mere efficiency. There was a puzzle here, she thought, though its shape remained elusive. The morning passed in the ordered rhythm of Meadowbank's routine. In the classrooms, the hum of lessons filled the air. French conjugations, geometric proofs, and the soft scratch of pens on paper. In the dining hall, the clatter of trays signaled the approach of luncheon. But it was on the tennis courts, under a sky of unbroken blue, that the first whisper of disruption emerged. Jennifer Sutcliffe, her blonde hair tied back with a ribbon, was practicing her serve with Julia Upjohn, her closest friend. The two girls, inseparable since their first year, were a study in contrasts. Jennifer, tall and athletic, moved with a natural grace, while Julia, shorter and wiry, compensated with relentless energy. Jennifer swung her new tennis racket, a sleek model her uncle had brought from a diplomatic posting in the Middle East. The ball sailed over the net, but her brow furrowed as she lowered the racket. "It's still off," she muttered, turning the racket in her hands. "It's heavier than it should be. Feel it, Julia." She handed the racket to her friend, who hefted it experimentally. Julia frowned, her freckled face scrunching in thought. "It does feel odd. Maybe it's the grip, or the strings." She swung it lightly, then shrugged. "You're imagining things, Jen. It's a perfectly good racket." "I'm not imagining it," Jennifer insisted, her voice tinged with frustration. "It's like there's something inside it. Uncle Robert said it was top quality, but it doesn't feel right." Julia laughed, tossing the racket back. "Maybe it's stuffed with gold bars," she teased. her eyes sparkling with mischief. You know, smuggled treasure from some desert palace. Jennifer rolled her eyes, but the comment lingered in her mind as they continued their game. The other girls on the court paid no attention, their laughter and shouts drowning out the exchange. Yet the moment was not entirely unobserved. Miss Van Sittert, the deputy headmistress, was watching from the sidelines, her arms crossed as she assessed the girl's form. A tall, elegant woman with a penchant for order, she had overheard Jennifer's complaint and filed it away as a curiosity. Meadowbank prided itself on precision, and an ill-fitting racket was a minor anomaly worth noting. As the afternoon wore on, the school settled into its familiar cadence. The girls dispersed to their next activities, and the staff gathered briefly in the common room for tea. Miss Springer, her face flushed from the morning's exertions, held court with tales of her previous posting at a school in the north, her voice carrying over the clink of teacups. Those girls needed a firm hand, she declared, and so do these. Too much dreaming, not enough doing. Miss Van Sittert sipped her tea in silence, her expression neutral, while Miss Chadwick, seated at the edge of the group, kept her eyes on her notebook, her pen moving in precise, measured strokes. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the school grew quiet, a different kind of stillness descended on the gymnasium. The girls had long since retired to their dormitories, their chatter replaced by the soft creak of the building settling into the night. Miss Springer, alone in the gymnasium, was tidying the equipment, her movements brisk and purposeful. She paused by the vaulting horse, her hand resting on its smooth surface. When a faint sound, a rustle, perhaps, or the scuff of a shoe made her turn. Her sharp eyes scanned the shadows, but the gymnasium was empty, its corners shrouded in darkness. "Who's there?" she called, her voice echoing unanswered. Shrugging, she returned to her task, unaware that she had only hours left to live. At midnight, the silence was shattered. A single gunshot rang out, muffled by the thick walls of the gymnasium, but sharp enough to rouse Miss Rich, the English mistress, whose room overlooked the sports pavilion. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, uncertain if the sound had been real or a fragment of a dream. Deciding it was nothing, she lay back down, but sleep eluded her. By morning, the truth would be undeniable. The discovery came at dawn, when a groundskeeper, making his rounds, noticed the gymnasium door ajar. Curious, he stepped inside and froze. Miss Springer lay sprawled on the floor, her eyes wide and unseeing, a dark stain spreading across her chest. The groundskeeper, a man of few words, ran to fetch Miss Bulstrode, his boots leaving muddy prints on the pristine floor. Miss Bulstrode arrived swiftly, her face pale but composed. She knelt beside the body, her fingers brushing the cold wrist, in a futile search for a pulse. "Call the police," she instructed the groundskeeper, her voice steady despite the horror before her. "And no one is to enter until they arrive." She rose, her mind racing. Meadowbank had never known such a scandal, and she was determined to contain it. The police arrived within the hour, led by Inspector Kelsey, a stocky man with a calm demeanor and a reputation for thoroughness. He surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, noting the absence of the murder weapon and the undisturbed state of the gymnasium. "A clean shot," he murmured to his sergeant, "straight to the heart. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." The sergeant nodded, his pencil scribbling in a notebook as they began their search for clues. The girls, roused from their beds, gathered in hushed groups, their faces a mixture of fear and fascination. Miss Bulstrode addressed them in the dining hall, her voice firm but reassuring. "There has been an incident," she said, choosing her words with care. "The police are handling it, and you are to continue your lessons as usual. There is no cause for alarm." But the whispers persisted, and the girl's eyes darted toward the gymnasium, now cordoned off with tape. Julia Upjohn, ever curious, slipped away from the group and crept toward the gymnasium, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and excitement. She peered through a window, her breath fogging the glass, and saw the police at work. As she turned to leave, her foot brushed against something hard beneath a mat near the door. Bending down, she lifted the mat and gasped. There, glinting in the morning light, was a single emerald, its facets catching the sun like a tiny green flame. Without thinking, she slipped it into her pocket, her mind racing with questions. Was this a clue? A treasure? She resolved to keep it secret, at least for now. Inspector Kelsey, meanwhile, was questioning the staff. Miss Van Sitterte reported Miss Springer's unpopularity, her blunt manner having alienated several girls. She was competent, Miss Van said carefully, but not well liked. Miss Chadwick, when questioned, was almost too composed, her answers brief and precise. Miss Springer kept to herself, she said, her eyes fixed on a point beyond the inspector's shoulder. I had little to do with her. Kelsey noted her reserve but pressed no further, his instincts telling him there was more to uncover as the day wore on. The school struggled to maintain its routine. The girls whispered of spies and secret plots, their imaginations fueled by the presence of Princess Shasta, a new pupil whose royal status was both a curiosity and a source of intrigue. Shasta, a delicate girl with dark eyes and an air of quiet dignity, kept to herself, but her presence added a layer of mystery to the unfolding drama. In London, Hercule Poirot read Inspector Kelsey's letter with growing interest. It described the murder at Meadowbank and hinted at complexities beyond a simple crime. A school is a microcosm, Poirot mused, his fingers tracing the edge of the paper. And where there is murder, there is motive hidden, perhaps, but always there. He set the letter down, his decision made. Meadowbank awaited, and with it, a puzzle to challenge his little gray cells. Back at the school, Miss Bulstrode stood alone in her study, her gaze fixed on the rolling lawns. The emerald, the gunshot, the death of Miss Springer, these were pieces of a larger pattern, one she could not yet discern. But as she watched the girls file into their classrooms, their faces pale but resolute, she felt a surge of determination. Meadowbank would endure, and the truth, however dark, would be brought to light. Chapter 3. Poirot enters the scene. The train from London to the countryside hummed along its tracks, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the restless thoughts of Hercule Poirot. He sat in a first-class compartment, his gloved hands folded neatly over the silver handle of his walking stick, his eyes half closed, as if in contemplation of some intricate puzzle. The green fields beyond the window blurred into a tapestry of emerald and gold, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, turning over the sparse details of Inspector Kelsey's letter. A murder at Meadowbank School, a prestigious institution for young ladies, was no ordinary affair. The involvement of a gym mistress, shot in the dead of night, suggested a motive far deeper than a schoolroom quarrel. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly, a sign of the anticipation that stirred his little gray cells. He arrived at Meadowbank by mid-afternoon, stepping onto the platform of the small local station with the air of a man who belonged precisely where he stood. A police car, arranged by Inspector Kelsey, awaited him, and soon the imposing gates of the school came into view. The red brick buildings, their windows gleaming in the sunlight, exuded an aura of order and tradition, yet Poirot sensed an undercurrent of disquiet. The uniformed constable at the gate saluted as he passed, and Poirot inclined his head, his sharp eyes already scanning the grounds for clues to the school's character. Miss Eleanor Bulstrode greeted him in her study, a room of understated elegance, with bookshelves lining the walls and a mahogany desk bearing a single vase of fresh roses. She rose to meet him, her posture erect, her expression a blend of courtesy and barely concealed strain. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a hand. "I am grateful for your presence, though I wish it were under happier circumstances." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the weight of the past 24 hours. Poirot bowed, his manner impeccable. "Madame, it is my honor to assist. A tragedy such as this, in a place of learning, is a wound to the very soul of order. I shall endeavor to restore it." He took the seat she offered, his small, precise movements contrasting with the room's grandeur. "Tell me, if you please, of this Miss Springer and the circumstances of her death." Miss Bulstrode recounted the events with clarity. The gunshot in the night, the discovery of the body in the gymnasium, the missing weapon, and the shock that had rippled through the school. She described Miss Springer as competent, but abrasive, a woman whose bluntness had not endeared her to the girls or staff. She was new this term, Miss Bulstrode added, and perhaps had not yet found her place among us. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. "And the other staff, the pupils, is there anyone who stands out, perhaps, as unusual?" His question was gentle, but his eyes were keen, searching her face for the slightest flicker of hesitation. Miss Bulstrode considered this. "We have a diverse group this term. Princess Shasta, for instance, comes from a royal family in the Middle East, a region of some political unrest. I understand. Her presence has drawn attention, though she is a quiet girl. Among the staff, Miss Chadwick, our secretary, is indispensable but reserved. I have noticed her seeming somewhat preoccupied of late, though I cannot say why." Poirot's interest sharpened at the mention of Miss Chadwick. "Preoccupied, you say? In what manner?" "It is difficult to pinpoint," Miss Bulstrode admitted. "She is always meticulous, but there is a certain watchfulness about her, as if she is guarding something. Or perhaps I am imagining it, given the strain of recent events." "Imagination," Poirot said softly, "is often the mind's way of seeing what the eyes do not yet comprehend. I should like to meet this Miss Chadwick, and perhaps others. But first, the scene of the crime, if you please." The gymnasium was a vast, echoing space, its high ceilings supported by sturdy beams, its walls lined with climbing ropes and polished wooden bars. The police had cordoned off the area where Miss Springer's body had been found, though the body itself had been removed. Inspector Kelsey, waiting for Poirot, greeted him with a nod. "Good of you to come, Poirot. This is a nasty business, and I've a feeling it's not as straightforward as it looks." Poirot surveyed the room, his eyes lingering on the scuffed floor, the neatly stacked mats, the vaulting horse in the corner. "A single shot, you say? And no weapon found?" "None," Kelsey confirmed. "We've searched every inch of this place. Whoever did it was careful too, careful for a spur-of-the-moment act." Poirot knelt by the spot where Miss Springer had fallen, his fingers brushing the floor as if it might whisper its secrets. "And the emerald?" he asked, his voice casual, but his gaze sharp. Kelsey frowned. "Emerald? What emerald?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "A small matter, perhaps, that has not yet reached your ears. But let us say that a certain young lady has found something unexpected. I shall pursue it." He did not elaborate, and Kelsey, accustomed to Poirot's enigmatic ways, did not press. Leaving the gymnasium, Poirot requested a tour of the school. Guided by Miss Van Sittert, the deputy headmistress, she led him through the classrooms, where girls bent over their books, their whispers hushed under her stern gaze, and past the tennis courts, where a few pupils practiced, despite the morning's chill. Poirot paused by the courts, watching Jennifer Sutcliffe serve with her new racket. Her movements were fluid, but there was a slight hesitation, as if the racket's weight troubled her still. "That young lady," Poirot murmured to Miss Van Sittert. "She is fond of tennis." "Yes, Jennifer." "Oh yes," Miss Van Sittert replied. "Quite talented, though she's been complaining about her new racket. Says it feels off balance. I told her to have it restrung, but she insists it's something else." "Something else," Poirot echoed, his eyes narrowing. "Most interesting." He made a mental note to speak with Jennifer later, sensing that her complaint, however trivial, it seemed, was a thread in the tapestry of this mystery. In the administrative office, Poirot met Miss Chadwick. She sat at her desk, surrounded by files and ledgers, her hands folded neatly before her. Her face was pale, her expression composed, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her fingers as she adjusted her glasses. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and even, "I understand you are here to investigate Miss Springer's death. A terrible tragedy." "Indeed," Mademoiselle Poirot replied, his tone courteous, but probing. "You knew Miss Springer?" "Well, not well," Miss Chadwick said quickly. "She was new, and our duties rarely overlapped. I managed the school's records, you see, and she was occupied with physical education." Her eyes darted to the side, avoiding his gaze, and Poirot's interest deepened. "And on the night of the murder," he continued, "you heard nothing, saw nothing?" "Nothing," she said firmly, though her fingers tightened on a pen. "I was in my room, preparing the next day's schedules. It was a quiet night, until—" She trailed off, her lips pressing into a thin line, "until the gunshot." Poirot finished gently. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." He rose, bowing slightly, but his mind was already turning over her words, searching for the lie hidden within them. As evening fell, Poirot retired to the guest room prepared for him, a small but comfortable space overlooking the school's gardens. He sat at the desk, his notebook open before him, and began to jot down his observations. The murder of Miss Springer, the emerald found by Julia Upjohn, the peculiar weight of Jennifer's racket, the nervous demeanor of Miss Chadwick. These were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture they formed was still unclear. And then there was Princess Shasta, whose presence added a layer of political intrigue to an already complex case. Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes gleaming with determination. "The truth," he murmured, "is like a cat among the pigeons. It causes chaos, but it cannot hide forever." He extinguished the lamp and prepared for bed, knowing that tomorrow would bring new revelations and, perhaps, new dangers. Chapter 4. The Emerald's Tale. The morning after Hercule Poirot's arrival at Meadowbank School dawned crisp and clear, with a faint mist clinging to the lawns like a veil. The girls moved through their routines with a subdued air, their usual chatter tempered by the shadow of Miss Springer's murder. In the dining hall, the clink of cutlery and the murmur of voices formed a fragile semblance of normalcy. But Poirot, seated at a small table with a cup of coffee, observed the under of unease. His sharp eyes noted the way the girls glanced toward the gymnasium, now sealed off by police tape, and the way the staff exchanged guarded looks over their teacups. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the approach of Julia Upjohn, her freckled face flushed with a mixture of nervousness and determination. She hesitated, clutching her schoolbooks, then leaned close to whisper, "Monsieur Poirot, may I speak with you? It's important." Her eyes darted to the other girls, ensuring they were out of earshot. Poirot inclined his head, his expression encouraging. "Mais oui, mademoiselle. Let us walk in the garden, where we may speak privately." He rose, his movements deliberate, and led her outside, where the gravel paths crunched softly underfoot. The gardens were a haven of order, with rose beds trimmed to precision and a fountain bubbling at their center. Yet Poirot sensed the chaos lurking beneath the surface. Once they were alone, Julia reached into her blazer pocket and produced the emerald, its green facets catching the sunlight like a captive star. "I found this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "under a mat in the gymnasium, right after Miss Springer was found. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jennifer. I thought it might be important." Poirot took the gem, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as he examined it with the precision of a jeweler. Its clarity and cut were exceptional, suggesting a value far beyond a schoolgirl's trinket. "You were wise to keep this secret, mademoiselle," he said, his tone grave but kind. "This emerald is no ordinary stone. Tell me, precisely where did you find it?" Julia described the spot near the gymnasium door, her words tumbling out in a rush. It was just lying there, under the edge of the mat. I almost stepped on it. Do you think it has something to do with the murder? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps, perhaps not. But it is a thread, and in the tapestry of a crime, every thread leads somewhere. He slipped the emerald into his waistcoat pocket, resolving to have it examined later. You must tell no one of this, mademoiselle. Not even your friend Jennifer. Do you understand? Julia nodded, her eyes wide with the weight of her secret. As she returned to her classes, Poirot stood by the fountain, his mind turning over the implications of the emerald. A jewel of such quality, found at the scene of a murder, was no coincidence. It suggested a motive far grander than personal enmity, a motive tied, perhaps, to wealth or power. His next stop was the tennis courts, where Jennifer Sutcliffe was practicing her serve under the watchful eye of Miss Rich, the English mistress, who had taken on temporary supervision of outdoor activities. Poirot approached Jennifer as she paused to adjust her racket, her brow furrowed in frustration. Mademoiselle Sutcliffe, he said, bowing slightly, I understand you have a new tennis racket. May I see it? Jennifer hesitated, then handed him the racket, its sleek frame gleaming in the sunlight. It's a good one, I suppose, she said, but it's been bothering me. It feels heavier than it should, like the balance is wrong. Poirot hefted the racket, his fingers tracing the handle and strings. To the untrained eye, it appeared unremarkable, but to Poirot, its slight imbalance was telling. You received this from your uncle? Yes? A diplomat, I believe. Jennifer nodded. Uncle Robert. He brought it back from one of his trips. Ramadi, I think. Said it was a gift from a local merchant. Ramadi, Poirot repeated softly, his mind conjuring images of a turbulent kingdom known for its political unrest and rumored wealth in jewels. Most interesting. May I borrow this racket? For a time, mademoiselle. I shall return it unharmed. Jennifer agreed. Her curiosity piqued, and Poirot tucked the racket under his arm, his thoughts racing. The emerald, the racket, the murder, these were no isolated events, but parts of a larger design. He returned to Miss Bulstrode's study, where he found Inspector Kelsey waiting, his face etched with the weariness of a man grappling with an elusive case. Poirot, Kelsey said, rising from his chair, we've found nothing new. No weapon, no witnesses, no fingerprints. Whoever did this was a ghost. Not a ghost, mon ami, Poirot replied, setting the racket on the desk. A person, with motives and means. This racket, I believe, holds a secret. And the emerald, he produced the gem, watching Kelsey's eyes widen, is another piece of the puzzle. I suspect we are dealing with a crime of calculation, one tied to something far beyond the walls of Meadowbank. Kelsey frowned, taking the emerald. You think this is stolen? Smuggled, perhaps? Perhaps, Poirot said. But first, we must examine this racket. Its weight is curious. I would like it inspected by an expert discreetly, of course. Kelsey nodded, making a note. I'll arrange it. But what's your theory, Poirot? Smugglers at a girls' school? It sounds far-fetched. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The far-fetched, mon ami, is often the truth dressed in disguise. Consider, a school such as this, with its international pupils, is a perfect place to hide something valuable. Who would suspect a tennis racket? As Kelsey departed to arrange the racket's examination, Poirot turned his attention to the school's records. He requested access to Miss Chadwick's files, ostensibly to review staff schedules, but his true purpose was to observe the secretary herself. Miss Chadwick led him to her office, a small, orderly room filled with the faint scent of ink and paper. Her movements were precise as she retrieved the requested files, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes avoided his. You keep impeccable records, mademoiselle, he said, flipping through a ledger. Everything is in order, as one would expect. Yet I wondered, did Miss Springer ever discuss her concerns with you? Perhaps about the school, or other matters. Miss Chadwick's face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on a pen. Miss Springer was not one for conversation, she said. She was focused on her work. I had little to do with her. Poirot nodded, his expression bland but his mind alert. Her answer was too careful, too rehearsed. He thanked her and left, but not before noticing a small photograph on her desk, a faded image of a young woman in a foreign city, standing beside a man in a military uniform. It was a fleeting glimpse, but it stirred Poirot's curiosity. Who was Miss Chadwick, really? That afternoon, Poirot sought out Princess Shasta, finding her in the library, a quiet figure bent over a history book. Her dark eyes met his with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her accent soft but precise. "You are here about the gym mistress." "Yes." "Indeed, Your Highness," Poirot replied, bowing. "I seek only the truth. You have been at Meadowbank a short time. Have you noticed anything unusual?" Shasta hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the book. "This is a strange place," she said at last. "Everyone is kind, but there are secrets. I hear whispers about jewels, about my family. I do not know what is true." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Jewels, you say? What kind of whispers?" She shrugged, her expression guarded. "Just rumors. Girls talk. They say things about hidden treasures, but I pay no mind." Poirot thanked her and withdrew, his mind racing. The mention of jewels, combined with the emerald and the racket, suggested a smuggling operation, one that had turned deadly. Miss Springer, with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue, might have stumbled upon it, making her a threat to someone's carefully laid plans. As dusk settled over Meadowbank, Poirot stood by his window, gazing at the darkened grounds. The emerald, the racket, Miss Chadwick's nervous demeanor, Shasta's cryptic words, these were fragments of a larger truth. He would need to tread carefully, for the cat among the pigeons was watching, and it would not hesitate to strike again. Chapter 5. A Royal Connection. The air at Meadowbank School carried a chill that evening, as if the very walls sensed the gathering storm. The girls, though outwardly obedient to Miss Bulstrode's call for calm, whispered in corners, their eyes bright with the thrill of scandal. Hercule Poirot, however, was immune to such distractions. He sat in the guest room, his small neat hands arranging a series of notes on the desk before him. The emerald, the tennis racket, Miss Chadwick's guarded demeanor, and now Princess Shasta's cryptic mention of jewels formed a constellation of clues, each pointing to a hidden truth. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with activity, piecing together a pattern that was as intricate as it was dangerous. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Inspector Kelsey entered, his face etched with the strain of a case that refused to yield its secrets. "Poirot," he said, setting a folder on the desk, "we've had the racket examined, as you asked. You were right, it's not just a racket." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he opened the folder, revealing a report from a discreet jeweler in London. The tennis racket's handle had been carefully hollowed out, its interior lined with a thin layer of felt to conceal a small compartment. Though empty now, the compartment bore traces of wax and minute scratches, suggesting it had recently held something small and hard, gems perhaps. "Mon ami," Poirot said, tapping the report, "this confirms my suspicions. The racket is a vessel, a Trojan horse for smuggling, and the emerald found by Mademoiselle Upjohn is but one piece of the treasure it carried." Kelsey nodded, his brow furrowed. "But why a school? And why kill Miss Springer? If she found out about the smuggling, surely there were less drastic ways to silence her." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The drastic, inspector, is often the choice of those who are desperate. Miss Springer was not a woman to be silenced easily. Nest CPA. Her death suggests she posed a threat to someone with much to lose." He paused, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. "Tell me, what do you know of Princess Shasta's family?" Kelsey leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Her uncle is the ruling prince of Ramadi, a small but wealthy kingdom. There's been trouble there, a coup brewing, from what intelligence reports say. The family's wealth, including a collection of rare jewels, is said to be missing. Some believe it was smuggled out to fund loyalists abroad. Shasta was sent here for safety, but she's a target, no doubt about it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And so, the jewels come to Meadowbank, hidden in a schoolgirl's racket. A clever choice, a place where no one would suspect such a fortune. But someone did suspect, and Miss Springer paid the price. He rose, his movements brisk. I must speak with the princess again. Her words yesterday hinted at knowledge she may not fully understand. The library, where Poirot found Shasta, was a haven of quiet, its shelves heavy with leather-bound volumes, and the air thick with the scent of old paper. The princess sat alone at a table, her delicate hands turning the pages of a book she seemed not to read. Her dark eyes lifted as Poirot approached, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but wary. "You returned so soon." "Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness," Poirot said, bowing with his usual courtesy, "but I seek clarity. Yesterday, you spoke of whispers, rumors of jewels. I wonder if you might share more. Even the smallest detail may illuminate the path to truth." Shasta's fingers tightened on the book, her gaze dropping to its pages. "It is nothing," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. "The girls here, they talk. They say my family's wealth is hidden somewhere, that I know where it is, but I do not. I am only a student, far from home." Poirot studied her, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes avoided his. "And yet, mademoiselle, you are no ordinary student. Your presence here is a matter of state, Nan. If there are jewels, and if they are here, you may be in danger. Tell me, have you noticed anyone watching you? Anyone asking questions they should not?" Shasta hesitated, then shook her head. "No one, except Miss Springer, perhaps. She was always watching, always asking about my family. She said it was curiosity, but it felt different." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Different, you say? In what way?" "She asked about my uncle's travels, about gifts he sent me. I told her nothing, but she was persistent. I did not. Like her." Shasta's voice was low, almost a whisper, as if she feared being overheard. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Miss Springer's curiosity had been no idle interest, it seemed. Had she stumbled upon the smuggling operation, perhaps, by chance, and pressed too far? He thanked Shasta, and withdrew, his thoughts turning to the night of the murder. The gymnasium, the gunshot, the emerald deach, was a thread in a web of intrigue, and at its center was a secret worth killing for. That evening, as the school settled into an uneasy calm, a new disturbance shattered the quiet. A cry rang out from the art room, followed by the acrid smell of smoke. Poirot, dining with Miss Bulstrode in her private quarters, was on his feet in an instant, following the headmistress as she hurried toward the source. They found the art room in chaos, flames licking at a pile of canvases in the corner, the air thick with black smoke. Miss Rich, the English mistress, was already there, wielding a fire extinguisher with surprising competence, while a group of girls hovered at the door, their faces pale with shock. "Out, all of you," Miss Bulstrode commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. The girls obeyed, and within minutes, the fire was subdued, leaving a charred mess of paintings and a lingering smell of burnt oil. Poirot, his handkerchief pressed to his nose, examined the scene with care. The fire had started near a stack of canvases, but the source was no accident. A faint residue of a chemical accelerant glistened on the floor, invisible to all but his practiced eye. "Arson," he murmured to Miss Bulstrode, who stood beside him, her face grim. "This was no careless spark, madame. Someone wished to destroy or to distract." Miss Bulstrode's eyes narrowed. "Distract? From what?" Poirot did not answer directly, but his gaze swept the room, landing on a small, unburnt sketchbook, half hidden beneath a table. He retrieved it, flipping through its pages to find nothing but student drawings, landscapes, still lifes, nothing of note. Yet its placement, untouched by the flames, struck him as curious. "We must be vigilant," he said at last. "The one who set this fire may strike again." Inspector Kelsey arrived shortly after, summoned by a shaken Miss Vance. He listened to Poirot's observations, his expression darkening. "First, a murder, now arson," he said. "This is no ordinary school, Poirot. What are we dealing with?" "A game of shadows, mon ami," Poirot replied. "Someone wishes to keep us looking one way while they move in another. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily misled." He handed Kelsey the sketchbook, suggesting it be examined for fingerprints, though he suspected it would yield little. The fire, he believed, was a calculated move to divert attention from the true prize, the jewels hidden in Jennifer's racket. As night fell, Poirot returned to his room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. Shasta's revelation about Miss Spring questions confirmed the gym mistress had been a threat, but to whom? And the fire had it been set to destroy evidence, or to draw the police away from another part of the school? Poirot's fingers traced the edge of his notebook, where he had written a single word: Chadwick. The secretary's reserve, her nervous glances, her presence in every corner of Meadowbank's administration, these were not the traits of an innocent bystander. He resolved to watch her closely, to set a trap if necessary. The cat among the pigeons was growing bolder, and Poirot would not let it slip through his grasp. Chapter 6. The secretary's shadow. The dawn at Meadowbank School broke with a deceptive calm, the early light filtering through the mist to paint the grounds in soft hues of gray and gold. Yet beneath this serene facade, tension simmered. The fire in the art room, though swiftly contained, had left a pall over the school. And the girl's whispers now carried a sharper edge of fear. Hercule Poirot, ever attuned to the undercurrents of human behavior, sensed the growing unease as he sipped his morning coffee in the guest room. His notebook lay open before him, its pages filled with meticulous observations. The emerald, the tampered tennis racket, Princess Shasta's guarded words, and the fire that reeked of deliberate intent. But it was the name, Miss Chadwick, that dominated his thoughts, circled in his precise script with a question mark beside it. Poirot's suspicions of the school secretary had deepened. Her quiet efficiency, her guarded demeanor, her presence at the edges of every significant event, these were not the traits of a mere bystander. She was, he believed, a figure central to the mystery, though whether as perpetrator or pawn remained unclear. To test his theory, he resolved to observe her closely, to probe the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. He began his day with a visit to Inspector Kelsey, who was stationed in a temporary office near the gymnasium, poring over reports with a weary expression. "Poirot," Kelsey said, looking up, "we've got nothing new on the fire." The accelerant was could have come from the chemistry lab or even the groundskeeper's shed. "No fingerprints on that sketchbook you found either. It's as if our culprit is a phantom." "Not a phantom, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "A phantom leaves no trace, but our culprit has left many small, yes, but significant. The emerald, the racket, the fire, these are not accidents, but steps in a dance, and I believe Mademoiselle Chadwick knows the tune." Kelsey raised an eyebrow. "The secretary? She's quiet as a mouse. You think she's involved?" "I think," Poirot said carefully, "that she is more than she appears. I wish to observe her, but discreetly. Tell me, have you uncovered anything in Miss Springer's belongings? A letter, perhaps, or a note that might point to her suspicions?" Kelsey nodded, producing a small evidence bag from his desk. Inside was a folded piece of paper, its edges worn as if handled frequently. "Found this tucked in a book in her room. It's in code, or so it seems. We're sending it to the yard for analysis, but it's gibberish to me." Poirot took the bag, his fingers tracing the paper through the plastic. The writing was a series of numbers and letters, arranged in no apparent pattern. 3B, 7R, 12, LX9. A code, indeed, he murmured. And Miss Springer, she was not a woman to keep idle scribbles. This is a clue, Inspector, to what she knew or what she sought. He handed it back, his mind already turning over possibilities. A code suggested espionage, a connection to the jewels, and perhaps to Shasta's troubled homeland. Leaving Kelsey, Poirot made his way to the administrative office, where Miss Chadwick was at her desk, sorting correspondence with her usual precision. The room was orderly, its files stacked neatly, its air heavy with the scent of ink and wax polish. She looked up as Poirot entered, her pale eyes flickering with a momentary unease before settling into their customary calm. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but steady. "How may I assist you?" Poirot smiled, his manner disarming. "Mademoiselle, I am merely curious about the workings of this fine school. Your records, they are impeccable, Nan. I wonder if you might show me the staff schedules for the night of Miss Springer's death. A small matter, but it helps to understand the rhythms of Meadowbank." Miss Chadwick hesitated, then rose, to retrieve a ledger from a shelf. Her movements were deliberate, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in her fingers as she opened the book. "Here," she said, pointing to a neatly penned grid. "This shows the staff's duties and locations. I was in my room, as I told the inspector, preparing the next day's schedules." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes scanning the page but lingering on her face. "And Miss Springer? Her duties kept her late in the gymnasium, perhaps?" "She often stayed late," Miss Chadwick replied, her tone clipped. "She was particular about the equipment. Always checking, always tidying." "Particular," Poirot echoed, his voice thoughtful. "And did she ever share with you any concerns about the school, or perhaps about certain pupils?" Miss Chadwick's lips tightened, and for a moment Poirot thought she might deflect, but she shook her head. "No, Monsieur Poirot," she kept to herself. "I had no reason to speak with her beyond administrative matters." "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "You have been most helpful." He left the office, but not before catching a glimpse of her expression, a flash of relief, quickly masked. She was hiding something, he was certain, and he resolved to set a trap to uncover it. That evening, Poirot enlisted the help of Miss Bulstrode, explaining his plan in the privacy of her study. "Madame," he said, "I believe the key to this mystery lies in what is hidden. The tennis racket. It was a vessel for jewels, but I suspect more remain undiscovered. I propose a small experiment. Let us place Mademoiselle's racket in the gymnasium, under watch, and see who comes to claim it." Miss Bulstrode's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. "A risky plan, Monsieur Poirot, but I trust your judgment. I'll ensure the gymnasium is accessible, but monitored." "Who do you suspect?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Let us say I am curious about certain shadows, but I require your discretion, madame. No one must know of this plan, not even Inspector Kelsinot yet." The trap was set with care. Jennifer's racket was placed on a bench in the gymnasium, its strings gleaming under the dim lights. Poirot and a young constable, hidden in the shadows of the equipment room, waited in silence, their breath shallow in the stillness. The hours crept by, the only sound the distant tick of a clock and the occasional creak of the building. At midnight, a faint noise broke the quiet, a soft shuffle of footsteps, cautious and deliberate. Poirot's heart quickened, his eyes fixed on the gymnasium door. It opened slowly, and a figure slipped inside, moving with the stealth of one accustomed to secrecy. The dim light revealed Miss Chadwick, her face pale and taut, her hands clutching a small torch. She approached the racket, her movements swift, but hesitant, as if she feared discovery. Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the darkness. "Bonsoir, Mademoiselle Chadwick, you seek something, perhaps? She froze, the torch clattering to the floor. Her eyes, wide with panic, met his, and for a moment, she seemed poised to flee. But Poirot's calm presence held her in place. It is no use, mademoiselle, he said gently. The racket, it calls to you. Why? Miss Chadwick's shoulders sagged, and her voice, when she spoke, was barely a whisper. I was checking the equipment. It's my duty to ensure everything is in order. Poirot shook his head, his expression one of regret. A poor excuse, mademoiselle. You came for the racket, and I suspect you know what it once held. Shall we speak plainly? Before she could answer, the constable stepped forward, his notebook ready. Miss Chadwick's face crumpled, and she sank onto the bench, her hands covering her face. I didn't kill her, she said, her voice breaking. I swear it, Monsieur Poirot. I only wanted the jewels. They were my orders. Orders. Poirot's voice was sharp now, his eyes boring into hers. From whom, mademoiselle? And what jewels do you speak of? She hesitated, then spoke, in a rush, as if the words had been damned too long. I am not what I seem. I was sent here, to Meadowbank, to retrieve something hidden jewels, smuggled from Ramadi. They were meant to fund a cause, a movement. Miss Springer, she suspected something. She saw me searching, asked too many questions. I told her nothing, but she wouldn't stop. And then, she was dead. Poirot's mind raced, fitting her words into the puzzle. And the fire. Was that your doing to cover your tracks? No. Miss Chadwick's voice rose, desperate. I didn't set the fire. I don't know who did. I only wanted the jewels, to complete my task and leave. Poirot studied her, his expression unreadable. Her confession was a breakthrough, but it raised as many questions as it answered. Was she the killer, or merely a pawn in a larger game? He signaled to the constable to take her into custody, promising a full interrogation in the morning. As Miss Chadwick was led away, her head bowed, Poirot picked up the racket, its weight, a reminder of the secrets it had held. Back in his room, he sat at his desk, the coded note from Miss Springer's belongings spread before him. The numbers and letters 3B7R12LX9 seemed to pulse with meaning, a message from the dead. Poirot's little gray cells worked furiously, seeking the key to unlock it. Miss Chadwick's confession had confirmed the smuggling operation, but the murder, the fire, the coded note, these suggested a deeper conspiracy, one that reached beyond Meadowbank's walls. As the clock struck 2, Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes gleaming with determination. The cat among the pigeons had shown itself, but it was not yet caught. Tomorrow, he would unravel the next thread, and the truth would be one step closer. Chapter 7. A dangerous game. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Meadowbank School, casting a pale glow over the corridors where the girls moved in hushed groups, their voices subdued by the weight of recent events. The arrest of Miss Chadwick, the unassuming secretary revealed as a foreign agent, had sent ripples of shock through the school, though Miss Bulstrode had worked tirelessly to maintain order. Hercule Poirot, however, was far from satisfied. The confession of Miss Chadwick, while illuminating, had left too many questions unanswered. The murder of Miss Springer, the fire in the art room, the coded note, these were pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit neatly together. As he sipped his morning tisane in the guest room, Poirot's little gray cells churned, seeking the thread that would unravel the mystery. Miss Chadwick's interrogation was scheduled for later that morning, and Poirot intended to be present. But first, he sought to clarify another piece of the puzzle, the coded note found among Miss Springer's belongings. He met Inspector Kelsey in the temporary police office, a cramped room cluttered with files and the faint smell of cigarette smoke. Kelsey looked haggard, his eyes red from a sleepless night, but he greeted Poirot with a nod. "We've had the code analyzed," he said, sliding a deciphered transcript across the desk. "It's not much, but it's something. The numbers and letters 3B7 are 1 to Alex 9.2, a location in the school. The gymnasium, specifically, near the climbing ropes. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he studied the transcript. A location, you say? And what did you find there? Nothing yet, Kelsey admitted. We searched again this morning, but the area's clean. If Miss Springer hid something, it's either gone, or we're missing it. Poirot nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of the paper. Miss Springer was a woman of observation, She suspected something, perhaps saw Miss Chadwick searching, and left this note as a clue. But to what? Another jewel, perhaps, or evidence of the smuggling. He paused, his mind turning over possibilities. We must search again, Inspector, but with fresh eyes. And we must press Mademoiselle Chadwick further. Her confession, it is only half the truth. The interrogation took place in Miss Bulstrode's study, a setting chosen for its privacy and authority. Miss Chadwick sat at the center of the room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale but composed. Poirot stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the morning light, while Kelsey sat opposite her, his notebook open. Miss Bulstrode observed from her desk, her expression a mask of controlled indignation. Mademoiselle Chadwick, Poirot began, his voice soft but penetrating. You have admitted to being an agent, tasked with retrieving jewels hidden in Mademoiselle Sutcliffe's tennis racket. You claim you did not kill Miss Springer, yet she was a threat to your mission. Tell us, if you please, who gave you these orders, and what else you know of this affair. Miss Chadwick's eyes flickered, with fear, but she held her ground. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was sent by a group, I cannot name them. They are powerful, and I was only a courier. My task was to find the jewels and deliver them. Miss Springer, she saw me in the gymnasium one night, searching the equipment. She asked questions, threatened to tell Miss Bulstrode. I begged her to stay silent, but I did not kill her. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And the fire, mademoiselle? You deny setting it, yet it served to distract, to draw attention from your activities. Convenient, non. I swear it wasn't me, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know who set the fire. I was as shocked as anyone. Kelsey leaned forward, his tone firm. Then who? Miss Chadwick? If you're telling the truth, someone else is involved. Another agent. A partner. She shook her head, her lips trembling. I worked alone. That was the agreement. I don't know who else might be here, but there were whispers in the messages I received. They spoke of others, watching, waiting. I thought it was just to keep me in line. Poirot's interest sharpened. Whispers, you say, of others within the school. Mademoiselle, you must be precise. Your freedom may depend on it. Miss Chadwick hesitated, then spoke in a rush. The messages came through a dead drop-a book in the library, left open to a certain page. I was told to check it weekly. The last message mentioned the hawk, someone else watching the school. I thought it was a code for surveillance, but now, I'm not sure. Poirot exchanged a glance with Kelsey. The mention of the hawk suggested a second player, someone still at large. He turned back to Miss Chadwick, his voice gentle, but insistent. And the coded note in Miss Springer's possession. Did you know of it? No, she said, her eyes wide. I swear, I didn't know she had anything like that. If she did, she must have found it herself, snooping where she couldn't. The interrogation yielded little more, and Miss Chadwick was returned to custody, her fate uncertain. Poirot, however, was energized by the new lead. The gymnasium, the climbing ropes, the mysterious hawk. These were signposts to a deeper conspiracy. He proposed a thorough search of the gymnasium, focusing on the area indicated by the code. The search was meticulous, conducted under Poirot's watchful eye. The climbing ropes, thick and knotted, hung against the gymnasium wall, like silent sentinels. Poirot examined each one, his fingers probing for anything unusual. Near the top of one rope, secured by a loose knot, he found a small leather pouch, barely larger than a matchbox. Inside was a single diamond, its facets glinting with cold fire. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, holding it to the light. "Another piece of the treasure, hidden in plain sight." Kelsey whistled softly. "That's no trinket. It's worth a fortune. Miss Springer must have been close to uncovering the lot." "Indeed," Poirot said, slipping the diamond into an evidence bag, and her curiosity cost her life. "But who is this hawk, Inspector? Another agent, or the true mastermind?" Determined to tighten the net, Poirot devised a second trap. He instructed Kelsey to spread a rumor among the staff that another jewel had been found, this time in the library, hidden in a book. The rumor was subtle, shared only with key staff members, including Miss Van Sittert, Miss Rich, and the groundskeeper, Mr. Jenkins. Poirot's hope was to flush out the hawk, to provoke a reaction from someone still lurking in the shadows. That night, under the guise of routine patrols, the police kept watch on the library. Poirot, stationed in a nearby alcove, waited with the patience of a predator. The hours ticked by, the school silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl. Then, just before 1 a.m., a figure emerged from the darkness, moving swiftly toward the library shelves. It was Miss Rich, the English mistress, her face tense as she scanned the books. She reached for a volume-thick tome on Renaissance art and flipped it open, her hands trembling as she searched its pages. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Mademoiselle Rich, you seek something, perhaps, a jewel, or something more incriminating." Miss Rich gasped, the book falling from her hands. "Monsieur Poirot, I was only looking for a reference, for tomorrow's lesson." Poirot's smile was polite, but unyielding. "At this hour, mademoiselle, and with such urgency. Nan, I think you are the hawk, or perhaps another bird caught in this dangerous game." Miss Rich's composure crumbled, and she sank into a chair, her face pale. "I'm not what you think," she said, her voice low. "I was approached, months ago, by someone claiming to represent a cause. They offered money more than I could ever earn here to watch for anything unusual, to report on the jewels. I didn't know about the murder, I swear. I only wanted the money." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And who approached you, mademoiselle? A name, if you please." "I don't know," she said, her voice breaking. "The messages came through. Letters, unsigned, left in my pigeonhole. They mentioned Miss Chadwick, said she was unreliable, that I was to watch her. I thought it was harmless." Poirot exchanged a glance with the constable who had joined them. Miss Rich's confession, like Miss Chadwick's, pointed to a larger network, one with tendrils reaching far beyond Meadowbank. The hawk was not her, it seemed, but someone higher. Pulling the strings as Miss Rich was taken for questioning, Poirot returned to the gymnasium, the diamond heavy in his pocket. The game was growing more dangerous, the players more desperate. The coded note, the jewels, the fire, the murder all were part of a web spun by a mastermind still hidden. Poirot's little gray cells burned with determination. He would find the hawk, and with it, the truth. Chapter 8. The unraveling. The morning sun rose over Meadowbank School, its rays piercing the mist to illuminate the red brick buildings with a deceptive warmth. Inside, however, the atmosphere was taut, the school's usual order strained by the arrest of Miss Chadwick and the troubling revelations about Miss Rich. Hercule Poirot stood in the guest room, his small, precise hands arranging his notes on the desk like pieces on a chessboard. The emerald, the diamond, the tampered tennis racket, the coded note, the fire, and now the confessions of two women, entangled in a web of espionage. These were the threads of a tapestry that was finally taking shape. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with the clarity that comes just before a puzzle's solution. Yet he knew the final piece remained elusive. He was determined to bring the case to a close that day. The school could not withstand further disruption, and Miss Bulstrode's strained expression at breakfast had underscored the urgency. Poirot requested a gathering in the library, a room of quiet authority with its towering shelves and polished tables, where he could present his findings to the staff and select pupils. Miss Bulstrode agreed, her trust in Poirot unwavering despite the chaos that had engulfed her school. By mid-morning, the library was filled with a tense assembly. Miss Bulstrode, Miss Van Sittart, Inspector Kelsey, a handful of senior staff, and the pupils, Jennifer Sutcliffe, Julia Upjohn, and Princess Chase. Miss Chadwick, still in custody, was absent, as was Miss Rich, who was being questioned separately. Poirot stood at the head of the room, his diminutive figure commanding attention with the quiet confidence of a maestro. He held Jennifer's tennis racket in one hand and a small velvet pouch containing the emerald and diamond in the other, their presence a silent accusation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, "we have gathered to unravel a mystery that has brought tragedy to this fine institution. The murder of Miss Springer, the fire in the art room, the hidden jewels, these are not random acts, but parts of a calculated plot. Today, I shall reveal the truth, and the cat among the pigeons will be caught." A murmur rippled through the room, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing it. "Let us begin with the jewels," he said, opening the pouch to display the emerald and diamond, their facets glinting in the light. These were smuggled into Meadowbank, hidden in the handle of Mademoiselle Sutcliffe's tennis racket, a gift from her uncle, a diplomat in Ramadi. The racket, it was a clever choice, a mundane object, unlikely to draw suspicion. But Miss Springer, with her sharp eyes and sharper curiosity, suspected something amiss. He turned to Jennifer, who sat wide-eyed beside Julia. "Mademoiselle, you remarked that your racket felt heavy, unbalanced. You were correct. It was a vessel for a fortune in gems, intended to fund a political cause in Ramadi, where the family of Princess Shasta faces a coup." Shasta shifted in her seat, her dark eyes fixed on Poirot, but she said nothing. Poirot continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "Miss Springer, she was a woman of discipline, non-vote, also of observation. She noticed unusual behavior, perhaps a late-night search, perhaps a whispered conversation. She confronted the one responsible, and for this, she was silenced with a single shot to the heart." Inspector Kelsey leaned forward, his notebook open. "You're saying the murder was to protect the smuggling operation?" "Precisement," Poirot replied, "but there is more. The fire in the art room was no accident, but a distraction, meant to divert attention from the jewels or their hiding place. And then there is the coded note 3B7R1 to LX9, found in Miss Springer's belongings, pointing to a diamond hidden in the gymnasium's climbing ropes. These clues, they lead us to a conspiracy, one with many players." He turned to Miss Bulstrode, his expression grave. "Madame, your school has been a stage for espionage. Miss Chadwick, your secretary, confessed to being an agent tasked with retrieving the jewels. She claimed she did not kill Miss Springer, and I believe her. Her role was that of a courier, not a murderer. But there is another, a hawk, as she called it, pulling the strings." The room grew still, the air thick with anticipation. Poirot's eyes settled on Miss Van Sittart, the deputy headmistress, who sat with her hands folded, her face a mask of calm. "Mademoiselle Van Sittart," he said softly, "you have been most discreet, most composed. Yet it is you, I believe, who is the hawk." A gasp broke the silence, and Miss Van Sittart's eyes widened, though she quickly regained her composure. "Monsieur Poirot, that is absurd. I am loyal to Meadowbank, to Miss Bulstrode. I have no part in this." Poirot's smile was polite, but unyielding. "Nan, mademoiselle, you are too clever for that. Let us consider the facts. You were present at every key moment at tennis courts, when Mademoiselle Sutcliffe complained of her racket. The staff room when Miss Springer's abrasive nature was discussed. The art room after the fire. You are a woman of order, yet you overlooked the chemical residue in the art room. A detail a deputy headmistress would surely notice. And then there is this. He produced a small photograph, the one he had glimpsed in Miss Chadwick's office, showing a younger Miss Van Sittard beside a man in a military uniform. This was found among Miss Chadwick's possessions, but it is not hers. It is yours, taken in Ramadi years ago, with a man known to be a key figure in the political unrest there. You are not merely a teacher, mademoiselle. You are an operative, sent to ensure the jewels reached their destination. Miss Van Sittard's face paled, but she shook her head. You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. A photograph means nothing. Perhaps, Poirot said, but the pistol does. He signaled to Kelsey, who produced an evidence bag containing a silencer-equipped pistol, its sleek design unmistakable. This was found in a hidden compartment in your room, mademoiselle. During a search this morning, it matches the type used to kill Miss Springer. You see, when Miss Chadwick failed to retrieve the jewels quickly, you grew impatient. Miss Springer's suspicions threatened your mission, so you eliminated her. The fire was your attempt to destroy any evidence she might have left behind. Miss Van Sittard rose, her voice icy. This is preposterous. I demand enough, Miss Bulstrode interrupted, her voice like steel. Monsieur Poirot, are you certain? Poirot nodded. The evidence, it speaks for itself. The pistol, the photograph, the coded messages Miss Chadwick received, they all point to Mademoiselle Van Sittard as the orchestrator. She used Miss Chadwick as a pawn, and Miss Rich as a reluctant spy, but it was she who pulled the trigger. Kelsey stepped forward, his face grim. Miss Van Sittard, you'll need to come with us. For a moment, it seemed she might resist, but her shoulders sagged, and she allowed herself to be led away, her composure crumbling into a mask of defeat. The room erupted in whispers, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. There is one final matter, he said, holding up the tennis racket. The remaining jewels, they are here, hidden in the handle, as Mademoiselle Chadwick suspected. Inspector, if you please. Kelsey took the racket, and under Poirot's guidance, carefully unscrewed the handle's end cap. A small cloth bag tumbled out, spilling a cascade of gems, rubies, sapphires, and more diamonds onto the table. The girls gasped, and even Miss Bulstrode's stern facade softened in astonishment. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, a king's ransom, hidden in a schoolgirl's racket. With the jewels recovered, and Miss Van Sittard in custody, the case was closed. Poirot addressed the assembly one last time. Meadowbank is a place of learning, of growth, he said. But it has been touched by greed and ambition. Let this be a lesson. The truth, it cannot be hidden forever, not from Hercule Poirot. As the staff and pupils dispersed, Miss Bulstrode approached him, her eyes weary but grateful. Monsieur Poirot, you have saved this school from ruin. How can we thank you? Poirot bowed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Madame, the thanks is in the order restored. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a train to catch. By evening, Meadowbank had begun to settle, the girls returning to their lessons, the staff to their duties. Poirot boarded the train back to London, the rhythm of the rails a soothing counterpoint to his thoughts. The cat among the pigeons had been caught, and his little gray cells could rest at least until the next mystery called.